Now, RP1 is currently fully loaded on both the first and second stages. Liquid oxygen is fully loaded on the first stage and nearly fully loaded on the second stage. And we'll be closing that out at T-minus 3 minutes and T-minus 2 minutes, respectively. So, with Falcon 9 now moving into the final stages of terminal count, vehicle remains in good health. About 60 seconds before liftoff, you'll hear final announcement that Falcon 9 is in startup. That'll mean that the rocket has switched to its internal flight computers and they will be autonomously controlling the launch countdown. So, with just about 3.5 minutes to go before launch, let's pause here and listen to terminal count.
Strong back retract is closed out.
Stage 1 locks load closed out. Stage 2 locks load closed out. Falcon 9 is on internal power.
Also started.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
This is the mission director. Go for launch.
Gas closeouts are complete.
It's 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. Merry Christmas, BTS.
Stage 1 prompt terminal.
Power and telemetry nominal. And here we go. We've had a successful liftoff of the Falcon 9 vehicle carrying the GPS-3 space vehicle into transfer orbit. We're a little bit less than a minute into our launch, and we're preparing for that point of maximum aerodynamic pressure known as maximum Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
And we've hit our point of maximum Q. These are the strongest loads the vehicle experiences during liftoff. At this point now, it's just an easy acceleration up into our desired transfer orbit. All is looking good with the stage 1 trajectory.
Experiencing maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Now we'll have a very busy next 90 seconds. We have 3 events coming up: main engine cutoff, stage separation, and second engine start number 1. That first event, main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where all of the 9 Merlin 1D engines you see roaring right now on the screen on our Falcon 9 first stage are going to shut down. This is then followed by stage separation, or the separation of our first and second stages. And finally, the second engine start, where our MVAC, our Merlin vacuum engine, on the second stage engine lights up. And you just heard now, we're starting to pump cold liquid oxygen through the plumbing of the MVAC engine to prepare it for ignition, just like we did with the Merlin 1D engines before liftoff. And just a reminder, we're not going to be recovering that first stage. So after stage separation, we'll be providing no views of that first stage, only the second stage and the payload. And those 3 events are going to occur in the next 10 seconds.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
All right, this is great. We've had a successful MECO, stage separation, and SES-1. Our next immediate milestone is the fairing deployment. We're going to expose the GPS-3 satellite to the vacuum of space. And at plus 3 minutes and 21 seconds.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you see the 2 fairing halves have separated and fallen away from the vehicle, exposing the GPS satellite to space. You can also see one of the fairing halves falling back into the atmosphere in the camera view right there. Everything is running nominally from the second stage to our payload.
Acquisition of signal Bermuda.
And you can see on your screen the MVAC is continuing to burn, raising the highest point of the second stage's orbit, which is also called its apoapsis, into that intended target orbit. Now we're currently in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns, with our next major milestone being called Second Engine Cutoff Number 1, or SECO-1, and that's scheduled for T plus 8 minutes and 16 seconds. Now, during SECO-1, we'll shut down the second stage's MVAC engine, which you can see again on your screen here. Now, after we shut down the second stage engine, we'll enter into the first of 2 planned coast phases.
Stage 2 is following a nominal trajectory.
Now, we mentioned this a little bit earlier in the webcast, but we're deploying today's GPS-3 space vehicle into a highly elliptical transfer orbit with a final intended target for the spacecraft being medium Earth orbit, or MEO. Now, for those of you who have followed our webcasts, you may be more familiar with the terms low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station is, and geostationary orbit, where many communication satellites reside in space. Medium Earth orbit is nestled between these two at an altitude of around 20,200 kilometers, or about 10,900 nautical miles above the Earth. Once the GPS-3 space vehicle separates from the second stage, it will use its own onboard engines to raise the lowest and highest points of its orbit to approximately the same altitude in that MEO range. That maneuver is referred to as circularizing its orbit. Now, a fun fact here, GPS satellites are tilted with respect to the Earth's equator by about 55 degrees, and that allows them to provide coverage to the Earth's polar regions. That orbital tilt is referred to as an orbit's inclination, and it takes extra power from the launch vehicle to safely reach. That high inclination orbit combined with the large payload mass are actually why we needed to reserve all of Falcon 9's performance today for the primary mission, and why we did not attempt to recover today's first stage. Now we're just under 2 minutes away from SECO 1, again, that's second engine cutoff number 1. MVAC engine is still burning bright, burning that RP1 and liquid oxygen. And we're continuing to boost the GPS-3 space vehicle into that highly elliptical transfer orbit.
Now you may see the status bar at the bottom of the screen. You might be wondering, why does we have 2 coast phases for this flight as opposed to the typical one? And why does it take us so long to deploy the satellite for this particular mission? It's really twofold. First, this helps us get the vehicle back within the Air Force's ground station coverage, and also the Falcon 9 is very busy during this period. During the second coast phase, we make sure the second stage is completely shut down. The MVAC engine gets purged of that RP1 propellant and gases, which helps us avoid contamination with the satellite. Also, we begin to spin that second stage to help us stabilize the payload for when it's deployed. Once this coast period ends and the Air Force ground station coverage is regained, we're finally ready to deploy that space vehicle. And the MVAC is still firing, and we have just about under 30 seconds to go before that SECO 1 milestone.
AFTSA.